Hello, my name is Jouni Vilkka and this is my channel TFF Teacher from Finland. Previously, I talked about the Hellenistic philosophy schools and the kinds of philosophy of life they taught. This time, I will talk about the most important of them, Stoicism. But first, please consider subscribing to my channel and clicking the thumbs up button. So influential as a philosophy school was Stoicism, that the word Stoic is still in use even outside of philosophical discussions. In that use, it usually means not showing pain or negative emotions and being able to endure hardship without complaining. That actually is the point of the philosophy. The name comes from the Greek words stoa poikile, meaning painted portico, because allegedly its first practitioners met and discussed philosophy among the columns in that Athenian location. This school lasted long in popularity, becoming dominant in Roman times and influencing Christian thinkers through the Middle Ages. Some people are trying to revive Stoicism as a popular way of life even in our time. One such person is William Irvine, whose highly recommendable book, Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy, is my main source for this section. Even if you do not choose Stoicism as your philosophy of life, there is much here that you can benefit from. If you don't think such an old philosophy can be applicable in the present era, think of James Stockdale, a Navy pilot who was shot down over Vietnam in 1965. He was held as a prisoner of war in primitive living conditions, suffering brutality and poor health, yet he not only survived but emerged an unbroken man. He managed this by practicing Stoicism. Stoicism was founded by Zeno of Citium, or Citium. He believed that the world is governed by reason. He was a pantheist and a fatalist. In his view, happiness or peace of mind can only be attained by accepting one's fate. Understanding and accepting this requires rationality. It then enables the philosopher to achieve the ideal state of mind, not being swayed by passions called apatheia. This leads to calmness, tranquility, or peace of mind, a state of ataraxia, where one is not shaken by misfortunes or other events of life. There have been Stoics from all walks of life, showing that the philosophy was applicable regardless of one's social standing. The Greek Stoics were primarily focused on the attainment of virtue, but as the movement reached Rome, the Roman Stoics made some subtle changes in the Stoic program, focusing on the attainment of tranquility. As Irvine puts it, for the Roman Stoics, the pursuit of virtue and the pursuit of tranquility are components of a virtuous circle. Indeed, a doubly virtuous circle. The pursuit of virtue results in a degree of tranquility, which in turn makes it easier for us to pursue virtue. Irvine considers some of the Roman Stoics to be the ones modern individuals have the most to gain from. These are Seneca, Musonius Rufus, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Lucius Annaeus Seneca, the younger, was born between 4 and 1 BCE, before Common Era, in Cordoba, Spain. He was born into the class of equites, or knights, ended up an advisor to Emperor Nero, and despite trying to retire from the position, was accused of conspiring to assassinate the emperor and ordered to commit suicide. He obeyed, dying in 65 CE, Common Era. Gaius Musonius Rufus was born between 10 and 20 CE in Etruria and died sometime by 101 CE. He was also born into the class of equites or knights. He was exiled twice from Rome, but remained a highly popular teacher. Epictetus was born into slavery between 50 and 60 CE. He was acquired by Epaphroditus, a secretary to Emperor Nero and later to Domitian, and so got to see Roman politics at the highest level. He died around 135 CE. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus is considered one of the best emperors of Rome, so he is clearly the Stoic occupying the highest position in society ever, yet he did not use his position to advance the popularity of Stoicism. In philosophy, he is also famous for his book Meditations. The Stoics, especially Musonius and Epictetus, urged their students not to withdraw from the world, but to be vigorous participants in public affairs. They thought that philosophy should be practical and universal, and thus also taught women. Whereas the Epicureans had avoided the problems of life in order to achieve a peace of mind, the Stoics decided to weather the storms and simply endure all the stress. Their key to such endurance was a kind of fatalism. They embraced the idea of determinism based on the idea of atomism, sprinkled with some supernaturalism. They believed that the universe is governed and permeated by a supernatural reason, world reason, also known as anima mundi. They seem to have believed in a circular time, as opposed to our idea of a linear time, where the events in the world deterministically repeat, although not quite as modern scientists would understand. As a result, they believed that everything occurs necessarily, and one cannot avoid one's fate. When there is nothing you can do to change the inevitable, they thought, there is no reason to fret about it. What will be, as Doris Day sang in a famous movie a long time ago. Instead of worrying about things outside of your control, focus on what you can control, your attitude and reaction to those things and events. You have some control over your interpretations and experiences of events that happen. For example, if the bus to school or work is late, causing you to be late as well, you could be angry about it, cursing and yelling while waiting at the bus stop. But that wouldn't change the fact that you will be late. Why would you be angry, and perhaps scary to others, as well as late? You could spend the extra time paying attention to nature, planning your future, or some other nice thing you can think about. Or you could just add negative emotions, a kind of suffering, to your own life. The choice of your reaction and behavior is at least to some degree up to you. Life is good when it is in accordance with nature and reason in control of one's will. It will then be in accordance with world reason, a metaphysical entity replaced by God among Christian thinkers later on. When you stop resisting the flow of the world, you can be at peace. If you resist, you will experience suffering. Living in accordance with nature also means living virtuously, displaying the virtues of courage, wisdom, and justice. There seems to be one glaring inconsistency in Stoicism: the idea that one can choose how one reacts to or experiences the events that occur in one's life is in contradiction with determinism, which the Stoics claimed to accept. But if their determinism doesn't cover one's psychology, and thus the way one experiences things, then why would it make it impossible for one to actually change things in the world? And further, Fatalism could inspire a pessimistic resignation, giving up, which would then function as a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't believe you can do anything about the awful things going on in the world, you will not even try to do anything about them. And so you will not be able to make the world even slightly better. Curiously, as I already mentioned above, the famous Stoics were not at all pessimistic like this. They weren't passive and withdrawn. To the contrary, they were fully engaged in daily life and very active even in politics. To explain how that is possible, I have to explain how they understood fatalism. The Stoics saw themselves as actors in a play written by someone else. They couldn't choose their role in this play, but must play it to the best of their ability and persuade themselves that whatever happens to them is for the best. Irvine explains that despite their determinism, despite their belief that whatever happened had to happen, the ancients were not fatalistic about the future. The weird part is that they were fatalistic about the past and the present, but not the future. We cannot change the past or even affect the immediate present. It may be that the Stoics were not quite consistent in their metaphysics, but they thought that we can and should strive to become better people, virtuous in the ancient sense of the word, and we should strive to do our social duty. So, they were not complacent or pessimistic. They simply realized that trying to change things that are outside of our control is only going to cause us anxiety and not really help in any way. If, on the other hand, we are able to distinguish between things we can control and things we can't, we will no longer worry about the things we can't control, and then we will be able to focus our attention on the things we actually can control. Irvine calls this the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, and some things aren't. He interprets Epictetus as thinking that some things we have complete control over, other things we don't. Some things we have no control over at all, and some things we have some but not complete control over. This means that there is actually a trichotomy of control. There are things that are 1. Completely in our control, and others that are 2. Completely outside of our control, but in between those are 3. Things that are partially in our control. Once we understand this trichotomy, we can use it to choose how to apply ourselves. It makes sense for us to spend time and energy on things over which we have complete control over, because our efforts will have guaranteed results. They will also generally require relatively little time and energy to achieve. According to Epictetus, we have complete control over our opinions, impulses, desires, and aversions. This seems a bit much. Most of these things we have some but not complete control over. We have more control over whether we act on an impulse, but not the impulse itself. For example, I suffer from acrophobia, the fear of heights. Certain kinds of places, like those stairs you can see through, can cause problems for me. I am not able to control that irrational fear, but I have some control over how I behave when that fear arises in me. What we more clearly have control over are the goals we set for ourselves and our values. Even this can be challenged from a metaphysical point of view, but according to the Stoics, we can choose whether we value fame and fortune, pleasure or tranquility. For example, Marcus Aurelius thinks the key to having a good life is to be indifferent to things that lack value and instead seek things that are genuinely valuable. If we form our opinions properly and assign things their correct value, we can avoid negative emotions and thus achieve tranquility. You can hopefully see here that Marcus Aurelius was motivated by the ancient virtue ethics. He saw as the reward of doing his duty the achievement of a good life. He was not motivated by the fear of some punishment in the afterlife, for example. According to Marcus Aurelius, we have complete control over our character, and only we can stop ourselves from attaining goodness and integrity. We may be cognitively limited so that we won't be able to become a scholar, but we can still cultivate other qualities like sincerity, dignity, industriousness, and sobriety. We can reduce our arrogance, rise above pleasure and pains, stop lusting after popularity, and learn to control our temper. The Stoics thought fame and fortune are of no real value. Pursuing them would disrupt our tranquility or require us to act in an unvirtuous manner. The price of fame would turn out to outweigh any benefit one might gain from it. To seek a social status, we would give power to others, even over our values, because we would have to act according to their values, their notions of success, in order to please them, or to avoid their displeasure. Instead of giving them this power, we should be indifferent to other people's opinions of us. It would of course be prudent to conceal our indifference. What makes Marcus Aurelius particularly relatable to me is that he seems to have been somewhat asocial to the point of being funny. Despite this, he still understood that man is by nature a social animal, and because of the idea of natural law, that nature is a guide to morality, he thought that we therefore have a duty to form and maintain relationships with other people, despite the trouble they might cause us. Because we are rational animals, using our reasoning ability, our primary function, he thought, we can discover that we should live among other people and interact with them in a manner that is mutually advantageous. This becomes a Stoic duty, and to fulfill this social duty, one must feel a concern for all mankind. This is one of the points Stoicism had in common with Christianity, making the philosophy attractive to some theological thinkers later on. Wealth is not of great value to Stoics either, although they saw nothing wrong with enjoying the good things life has to offer. We just must be ready to give up the good things without regret. After all, our circumstances may suddenly change. If we cling to them, we will just cause ourselves to suffer. Also, wealth is not very useful in the end anyway. As Irvine writes, wealth will not enable us to live without sorrow and won't console us in our old age. And although wealth can procure for us physical luxuries and various pleasures of the senses, it can never bring us contentment or banish our grief. Acquiring wealth, as long as it is done without harming anyone, which actually is an almost impossible feat, is not itself wrong for a Stoic. It just typically requires one to spend a lot of time and energy to attain it, that could perhaps be used for something that actually has intrinsic value. A further problem with wealth and luxurious lifestyles is that people who achieve them are rarely satisfied. Instead, they just want more and more of the same. In fact, this insatiability is a big reason for our unhappiness. Irvine calls this phenomenon hedonic adaptation. When we fulfill a desire, finally get what we want, we soon stop desiring it. We adapt to its presence, the fact that we have it or achieved it. Even lottery winners, soon after the exhilarating feeling of getting rich, feel the emotion fade away, and they return to being roughly as dissatisfied as they used to be. When we start taking the good things in our life for granted, we begin to lose appreciation for them. Ironically, most of us are in fact living our dreams, because we have achieved or gotten something we once dreamt of having, perhaps worked hard to get, but now that we have adapted to having it, we no longer derive pleasure from it. The Stoic answer to this problematic situation is to develop psychological techniques for appreciating such things by creating in ourselves a desire for the things we already have. They also developed other techniques to help us achieve tranquility. I will now explain these techniques. First, among the things that are up to us is setting goals for ourselves. It goes without saying that this means recognizing which among our goals are actually our own and which we have unthinkingly adopted from others, such as our family, friends, society, or culture. Most of us are dragging unnecessary baggage from social norms that we would do well to leave behind. For example, your job or salary does not define your value, your worth. Irvine recommends you to pay attention to whether your goal is internal or external. For example, if you play a board game to win, your goal is external. Whether you succeed or not is not up to you alone. But if you play the game merely to enjoy it, or to play to your best ability, your goal is internal. You have complete control over the internal goal, not the external. You will spare yourself the frustration or disappointment should you lose the game. The internal goal has the further advantage that it does not lessen your chances of winning, and might even increase them. At the same time, it will definitely lessen your chances of being upset. If your profession includes a lot of external failures, such as the medical field, it would be good for your mental health and longevity in the career to learn to internalize your goals. Irvine admits that he found little evidence that the Stoics advised internalizing goals in the manner described, but maintains that it is the obvious thing to do. I agree. Since you no doubt will want and need things, you should want only those things that are easy to obtain or that you can even be certain of obtaining. If you refuse to enter contests that you are capable of losing, you will never lose a contest. The obvious problem with this advice is that if you never try, you can never succeed. This internalizing of your goals may seem like just a trick, a mind game, pretending the goal to be different than it really is. But even if it is a mind game, it is a useful mind game. It might be possible to actually not look beyond the internalized goals, making them the real goals. Remember also that the Stoics did not try to change the whole world, accepting fatalistically that much is outside of their power. They could, however, do their best to bring about certain changes. Even if they failed, they would know that they had done their best, which was all they could ever hope to achieve. Such an attitude is much better than wallowing in self-pity for failing an impossible task. Pretty much everyone who has ever reflected on human desire and the causes of human dissatisfaction agrees that if what you seek is contentment, you will find it far easier to change yourself and what you want than changing the whole world around you. The second technique is contemplating bad things. That may sound counterproductive, but don't judge too hastily. The point is not to become glum and anxiety-ridden, spending all your time contemplating potential catastrophes. First of all, you only need to do this once in a while, not all the time. Second, there is a difference between contemplating and worrying about things. Contemplation is an intellectual exercise, and it is possible to do without it affecting our emotions. Everyone with even a little intelligence will, once in a while, think about the bad things that can happen to them, at least partially in order to prevent such things from happening. Unfortunately, some bad things will happen regardless. Seneca emphasizes the second purpose of this contemplation. Doing so lessens the impact of such bad things when they do occur. If we do not prepare for our losses in this manner, their effect on us will be that much greater when they do occur. So, to prepare for our losses, we can use negative visualization. We can imagine that we have lost the things we value. We should also imagine losing the people we love, as people may just drift apart or they could die. And we certainly will die ourselves at some point. The Stoics urge us to live each day as if it were our last. This should make us appreciate being alive and having the opportunity to do things, and this realization in turn may motivate us to not squander our very limited time. As Irvine points out, most of us spend our idle moments thinking about the things we want but don't have. We would be much better off to spend our time thinking of all the things we have and reflecting on how much we would miss them if they were not ours. Even if you are a poor person, you probably are wearing some clothes, the Stoics would remind you. You could lose them. But then, perhaps you would still have your health. The point is to imagine how things could be even worse than they are, and it is usually possible to think of how that could be. The point is not to worry about such things, but to learn to be grateful for what you in fact do have. This leads to the idea of Stoic joy, which goes beyond run-of-the-mill optimism. Irvine explains that on being asked whether a glass is half empty or half full, a Stoic would express his appreciation that his glass is half full rather than being completely empty. But then he would go on to express his delight in even having a glass. It could, after all, have been broken or stolen. He might go on to comment about what an astonishing thing glass vessels are. A Stoic would find joy in having any kind of glass at all, not to mention a glass with something to drink in it. Anyone with any interest in history will be familiar with Irvine's assessment that we tend to take for granted things that our ancestors had to live without, including antibiotics, air conditioning, toilet paper, cell phones, television, windows, eyeglasses, and fresh fruit in January. Upon coming to this realization, we can breathe a sigh of relief that we aren't our ancestors. Part of the effect of this technique of negative visualization is that instead of desiring ever more stuff to fill our empty lives with, we can learn to be satisfied with very little. This is a very good thing, especially environmentally speaking. Another part is the increased appreciation of what we have. If you know that a thing or event will not be repeated, you become aware of how unique and extraordinary it is. For a meal, a kiss, or sunset, whatever it is you may enjoy, there will always be the last time you get to enjoy it. As Irvine puts it, by contemplating the impermanence of everything in the world, we are forced to recognize that every time we do something could be the last time we do it, and this recognition can invest the things we do with a significance and intensity that would otherwise be absent. We will no longer sleepwalk through our life. Negative visualization can also be used in reverse, as projective visualization. To do this, you simply imagine the bad things you suffered as happening to someone else instead. Say your child broke a vase. Imagine that you had been visiting a friend and their child had broken a vase. You would not get angry at that child, would you? You can now see the relative insignificance of the bad thing and thus retain your tranquility. Another variation of the same technique is retrospective negative visualization, imagining never having had something that we now in fact have lost. Think of something you value, that you had and later lost. Now imagine you never had it. This should make you glad that at least you once had the thing. This is the thinking behind the old saying, better to have loved and lost than to never have loved in the first place. Whether you agree or not is up to you, of course. Using the first technique I explained here, you might rather avoid falling in love in the first place, to avoid suffering the loss. But of course, if you find yourself already too late for that, then this might at least ease your suffering after losing the love. Again, your experiences may vary. Seneca went further than the visualization technique by suggesting that in addition to contemplating bad things happening, we should sometimes live as if they had happened. For example, we could practice poverty, go without food, or otherwise forego something we usually enjoy. Following this line of thinking, Musinius recommended that we periodically cause ourselves to experience discomfort that we could easily have avoided. You could use a summer coat in the winter when outside, thus experiencing a bit more cold than you would have to. Not enough to risk hypothermia, of course, but enough to be somewhat uncomfortable. This practice isn't pointless or masochistic, but by welcoming a degree of discomfort, the Stoics hope to 1. Harden themselves against misfortunes they might suffer in the future. They also thought that 2. A person who experiences minor discomforts from time to time will become confident to be able to withstand also major discomforts should such things befall them. Thus, they will not fear such possibilities. Finally, 3. The experience of discomfort will also increase appreciation for the situation of not being forced to endure such discomforts regularly. The Stoics also thought that we should sometimes forego opportunities to experience pleasure. For example, turn down a glass of wine we know we would enjoy. Being able to control oneself like this may itself be a source of pleasure, but that is not the main reason for practicing this. There may also be other benefits for abstaining. You might enjoy ice cream, and so might think it pleasurable to take some from the freezer and eat it right now. But you know that doing so could have undesired consequences. A habit of eating ice cream can cause you to gain weight in a way you would not enjoy, for example. If you think of maximizing your pleasure in the long run, it might thus be sensible to not eat the ice cream. The next Stoic technique is meditation, but not like what you might know from Eastern wisdom traditions like Zen Buddhism. For Seneca, this technique is about thinking about the events of daily life, how one has responded to those events, and how one should have responded to them, stoically. Epictetus refined this by suggesting that we should keep a meditative mind while going about our daily lives, so that we are simultaneously actors and observers of ourselves. The observer in us should also comment on our behavior and direct us to act according to Stoic principles. As part of our meditations, we can go through a kind of mental checklist. Are we practicing the psychological techniques of Stoicism, such as negative visualizations? We can also check for indicators to measure our progress. Have our relations with other people changed? Can we shrug off insults and also praise without being affected by them? Have we stopped blaming and praising others? Have we started blaming ourselves instead of external circumstances when our desires are thwarted? Are we experiencing fewer negative emotions, and are we spending less time wishing things were different and more time enjoying things as they are? Whether we practice Stoic meditation only by thinking of the events of the day after the fact or simultaneously throughout the day, we will be able to better identify the sources of our distress. This way, we can more easily think of ways to avoid them. The Stoics were aware that most of our daily problems are related to other people, even caused directly by them. One problem was that vices seem to be contagious. One person's bad habit can influence those around them. Thus, the Stoics advise us to seek friends who share our values but are better than us at living according to them. By having as few bad influences as possible, we are more likely to be able to resist the vices. For example, if you don't want to smoke cigarettes, perhaps because you are trying to quit smoking, as you were once stupid enough to start it, you should seek the company of people who do not smoke. That way, they will at least not influence you badly. Another problem with people is that they can be annoying. To avoid getting annoyed by them, the Stoics advise us to keep in mind that there are most likely people who find us to be annoying. The same way, if you are irritated by someone's shortcomings, you should pause to reflect on your own shortcomings. Whatever the others are doing, it is not likely to be as harmful to your peace of mind as your own irritation or annoyance is. If someone actually insults you, the Stoics suggest that you first of all pause. This alone is very good advice you should always remember when using social media. Second, ask yourself, is what is being said true, and then how well informed the insulter is. The truth should not hurt you. Statements of facts are to be aligned with rationally. If someone calls me bald, for example, that is just a statement of fact and has no influence on me emotionally. Further, who is the source of the insult? If the person is someone you respect, trying to teach you something, the comment is not meant as an insult. If, on the other hand, the person is someone you disrespect, then it is just good to be disapproved of by someone like that, isn't it? You should not try to win their approval or care about their disapproval. Instead, be indifferent to their opinions and you will feel no sting from the insult. Remember, you are the source of the sting. It will only hurt if you let it. If you can, joke about the insult, laugh it off. This is very effective, but may be difficult. The next best option is to just ignore it. This is probably the best choice in social media. Even IRL, it is the best in that it requires no thought and so is easy to do. The reason why you should not allow yourself to feel the sting of an insult is that it will lead to anger. The Stoics thought of anger as anti-joy. They weren't Christians just turning the other cheek, but instead wanted a person who wronged them to be corrected, just not in anger and not as a retribution. What they wanted was for the person to be deterred from doing the same again, for their own good. The Stoics also wanted to remind us that just because things don't turn out as we want them to, it isn't necessarily because someone has wronged us. We should try to respond to unpleasant things with humor because it can prevent ourselves from becoming angry or help overcome our anger. We should also remind ourselves that our own behavior probably also angers other people. Seneca suggested that we force ourselves to smile and in other ways turn all anger's indications to their opposites. Relax, soften our voice, slow our pace, and so on. Our internal state will follow our external state, allowing us to overcome anger. Also, if we lash out in anger, as we are likely to do sometimes, we should apologize for our behavior. This will have a calming effect on us, and it can prevent us from obsessing over whatever made us angry. If we admit our mistakes, we are less likely to make the same mistakes again. The last tips have to do with dealing with death and our own mortality. In a way, practicing a philosophy of life like Stoicism is preparing for death. Many people fear death because they fear the unknown or what they believe about the afterlife. According to Irvine, many more are disturbed because they fear that they have mislived, that they have, that is, lived without having attained the things in life that are truly valuable. Someone with a coherent philosophy of life will know what in life is worth attaining, and because this person has spent time trying to attain the thing in life he believed to be worth attaining, he has probably attained it, to the extent that it was possible for him to do so. The famous Stoics were courageous enough to stand against the most powerful people of their time, risking everything and frequently losing their lives for it. They obeyed what they saw as their social duty to do so. Fear of exile or execution did not deter them. For them, living well, virtuously, was more important than living a long life. They seem to have thought that a life in which nothing is worth dying for is not worth living. Musonius, for example, recommended you to choose to die well while you can. Wait too long and it might become impossible to do so. It is better to die with distinction than to live long. Some Stoics committed suicide, while others, like Marcus Aurelius, hastened their death, for example by refusing to eat. Some, like Seneca, Thrasea Paetus, and Parea Soranus, chose a path leading to a death sentence, although they could have avoided it. Marcus Aurelius, as Irvine explains, consoled the dying by pointing out that when we know our death is at hand, we can ease our anguish on leaving this world by taking a moment to reflect on all the annoying people we will no longer have to deal with when we are gone. I personally think that the best consolation for the dying, or those who have lost a loved one, is that the dead do not suffer. Throughout life we suffer more or less, but it all ends in death when we lose consciousness. Stoicism lost popularity after the famous teachers were gone, and no one as inspiring was able to replace them. Irvine explains that when Stoicism was taught by mere mortals, potential pupils were much less likely to be swept away by it. Stoicism also was undermined by the rise of Christianity, in part because the claims made by Christianity were similar to those made by Stoicism. Christianity had one big advantage over Stoicism. It promised not just life after death, but an afterlife in which one would be infinitely satisfied for an eternity. Stoicism influenced Christian thinkers for a long time, and very recently it has seen something of a minor revival as academic philosophers have begun promoting it. There is much that seems useful in Stoic teaching, such as the goal to minimize, if not eliminate, the suffering caused by negative emotions. The techniques of Stoicism can help us experience a joyful existence, even if we don't accept the rest of Stoic philosophy, such as the metaphysics. As we cannot avoid experiencing uncertainties, unpleasant events, even catastrophes, dangers, assaults, war, online arguments, and the like, we should not focus on trying to do so. Instead, we should do what we can, which is choosing how we allow those things to affect us. We may be unable to do much about the causes of emotions, but strong emotions, affects, are a problem we can do something about. We do not have to allow ourselves to experience them. We can train our minds so that we are less likely to be harmfully impacted by the emotion-inducing events. The events will occur, but how they affect us emotionally depends on how we interpret them and how we have trained our minds to experience such events. The goal is to not allow our minds to be negatively affected, but instead to achieve a peace of mind. I have now covered all the important Hellenistic schools and their important teachings about philosophy of life. I hope you have learned something useful from them all. Thank you for watching if you have made it this far. Next time I will jump forward in history over the whole medieval period to talk about more recent developments in the philosophy of life. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.